This week's podcast is presented by GK Calls, Migra Ammunition, Gibraltar Duck Hunters Association, Gibraltar Boatyard, Turtle Box, Gator Decoys, Hunt Proof, Cooler Guard, Pattern Pros, Hodag, and last but not least, I'd like to have a huge shout out to Brian Ellithorpe for all of the support that he does behind the scenes. Now let's get into today's episode.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Great Lakes Outdoors podcast. Before we hop into today's episode, I wanted to give a special shout out to the Gibraltar Duck Hunters Association for all the things they do for us. We appreciate you guys. Thank you. And if you haven't signed up for the youth hunt coming up in September, make sure you do. There's only 50 spots, and I know they're going quickly. So make sure you get signed up, check out their Facebook, and get that link. So yeah, tonight's going to look a little bit differently. I'm flying solo tonight. Want to get a podcast out for you guys this week. So, I'm put my big boy pants on and we're doing it solo tonight. Don't have Kyle to hold my hand through this one. So tonight, what we're going to do, there's so many things we can talk about, right? There's the one buck, the baiting within 300 feet. But I want to do something a little bit differently. I went to my old friend, ChatGPT. I know some people absolutely hate that and some of the things that's going on in the world, but it made my life a little bit easier for tonight. So instead of me rambling on without any structure, like we usually do, we're going to have some structure tonight because I wouldn't be able to talk to you for 40, 50 minutes just like this. So I had my trusty friend, ChatGPT, write me up some stuff for tonight. And tonight we're going to go through maybe some controversial topics and give you my take on it. Some of it might not be that controversial. There'll be some fun stuff in there as well. But I would love to know what you guys think about some of the things that I have to say, some of my opinions. Make sure you comment on social medias, on the podcast platforms to get your take on it. So without ado, let's hop into it. So one of the big things that, growing up, one of the biggest things I looked forward to in hunting, I guess per se, was opening day rifle season. I went to a really small town in Michigan and we had opening day of firearm season off on November 15th. It's a holiday. It's still a holiday to me. I treat it like that, unfortunately, with my line of work. My work doesn't see it that way, but I still do. So is Michigan firearm season still the best hunting tradition in the state? For me, yes, I do. Like I said, in growing up in school, we got that day off, first of all. You look forward to that day all year long because there's a lot of other things besides just the hunting aspect of it, right? There's the camaraderie. There's more of a deer camp per se when it comes to that hunting. You get more people, deer blinds, the night before is, having fun, playing games. Now in my older years, a couple sarsaparillas, cornhole, stuff like that takes place. Then you get together, go out to the blinds the next morning, the hunting stories, because, some of those old timers that can't do bows anymore, they're still using rifles. So I would say you can't hit that for anything else, in my opinion. But, there's some diehard waterfalls out there, and Kyle might have a totally different opinion, like with opening day of duck season. I know people that, like, that's, they grew up with their dad and they'd go out and they'd have this one decoy they'd use for that opening day or their first hunt of the year. And that's their pinnacle moment, like they'd sign it, know how many birds they shot the day on it. But for me, it's definitely firearm season for sure. Like, that's never going to be touched, which might have some changes, right, with some of the new laws, but I think it's still going to hold true as one of the best times to be hunting, whether that be for any animal per se. This one right here kind of threw me through a loop here. I know there's some things that are going on in other states. Should Michigan allow Sunday hunting everywhere? I would say, yeah. I know there's been some rule changes with some of the managed areas on the waterfall side of things. Not too informed on that, but I would say, yes, I think they should. I think with the weekends, the weekends are huge for some people that can't get days off during the week. Being able to utilize those 2 days in your Friday night, I think are huge. So yes, I believe that needs to stay. I think they need to allow it everywhere and keep it allowed everywhere. This one right here, is baiting actually fair chase? 100%, unless you're in a fenced-in area, then it's not. But I think baiting is 100% fair chase. I know there's been some things that have happened in the last couple of weeks with the whole baiting, the 300 feet, which is mind-boggling that they haven't allowed baiting yet in general. But baiting is definitely fair chase if you're not in a fenced-in area. It does make things easier, right? I mean, instead of having the equipment to go out and do a food plot per se, not having that equipment, maybe not having the knowledge on it, you can go out and buy your sack of corn, your sack of beets, sugar beets, carrots, whatever, and potentially make that a successful hunt. Do you need bait to be successful or a food plot? No, you don't. I mean, it takes time. It takes time out in your woods, whether it be public or private, to do it. But some people don't have time, but they love being in the outdoors. And if baiting helps them get into the outdoors and helps them be successful and keep being in the woods, then I'm all for it. Should you pass a buck if you know that your neighbors won't? This one is big, and just because the fact is that I've grown up with this mindset for the longest time, with having neighbors that per se aren't up to the same standards, in which I keep saying, I didn't say I was going to talk about this. I said I was going to talk about it, but the 1 buck rule will have a change on this, because, one and you're done. In some areas, like in my area where I live at now, with the earn a buck, it's going to be different. But where I grew up, that mindset was, it had to be, 6 point or better for your first one. And then the second one needed to be bigger than that. Like, you needed to be excited about it. You needed to be like, this needed to be a good buck. Unfortunately, our neighbors didn't have that same mindset. And I still have a vivid memory of, watching this really nice buck. I hadn't shot a buck yet this year, but I had held myself to some higher standards, passing up on some of the smaller 2-year-old deer, which in years past I hadn't. And I had watched this 2-year-old 8-point for, 2 hours, and it walks across the property line and kaboom, they had shot that buck. And, I'd passed on that deer. It was a really, really nice deer, but it wasn't what I was looking for. But the neighbor, that's what they were looking for, and they were happy with it. And, we congratulated them. But, that's what the fair chase is about, right? Like, you can't stop that deer from walking across. That's where having good neighbors and being able to align on certain strategies, yes, that is huge. But, it's like, I'm living proof you pass on them. Like, even if your neighbors don't, deer are whitetails, they're smart, they'll make it through. So some of them don't, like my story I just said there, but passing on those deer, you need to do it. What's more important, genetic or habitat? This can go either way. Genetics are huge. You have those, 1-year-old nice basket rack 8-points that in return are going to be bigger deer and bigger deer and bigger deer. But I think habitat is definitely better, because if you don't have a great habitat, whether that be the food, the water, a place for them to hide to get to the age, the classification that you want them to be, they can have the best genetics in the world. But if they're in an area that's overpopulated with hunters, and they're not going to make it that far, it doesn't really matter, So I think habitat is definitely the way to go, and how you manage your property and the neighbors around you is where that would be at. Can you really manage deer on 5 to 10 acres? Manage? No. But I think cold deer, yes. Because, I think there was a deer, it's been a long time now, where they had collared a deer during the rut, and it had traveled like 10 miles, And so 5 acres, that's you're not going to hold deer there, but you can attract them. And I think that's where having all the things that a deer needs, shelter, food, water, you're going to be successful in that property. I have 10 acres behind my house here, and I'm doing everything I can to make it that. I'm kind of in a different predicament where I'm surrounded by areas where people can't hunt. So I have a little bit of a sanctuary. And so my little slice of 10 acres, deer travel through it pretty heavily. But if you put your time in, you put your research in, you put your sweat equity, your blood equity into it, you're gonna get big deer on your property. Not saying that with the neighbors, with people around you hunting, it's gonna be an issue, right? Because 10 acres isn't much for them to travel through. So you might have that deer on camera for all the summer, but they're gonna take 2 steps off your property and go onto the neighbors, and get shot open. That's 100% a possibility. Unlike where you have 100 acres and that deer is there's a pretty good chance that deer's gonna be on your property for up until the rut, until they need to go and chase does, right? But with 10 acres, you have that disadvantage where you need to do everything right. It needs to be when you hunt it. Because if you push that deer off your 10 acres, there's a good chance that deer is not going to come back. So it's hunting it at the right time, playing the wind, having the food source, having the water, having the bedding, and really utilizing all the things that are in with technology nowadays to be able to hone in on when you should hunt that piece of property. So that leads into the other thing, is the technology too much for hunting. And I would say in some cases, yes, but if we got it and it's legal, it's definitely something that we should be using, because it's going to make our lives easier. Not saying like with Onyx, right? Like with putting pins and having farmers' names and stuff where you can go and knock on doors, like that was still possible before Onyx, right? Like people were getting plat maps, making pins, doing aerial shots, putting pins in and stuff like that. Like that was still relevant then. This is just on your phone and easily accessible. Like people could look up someone's name in a phone book. It's nothing out of the norm. It does make people that are getting into hunting easier, right? Because then it gives them the way to be able to find all these different public land spots, property borders. It's all in your hand. You don't have to carry around a plat map, aerial map, stuff like that. I mean, it definitely makes it easier on the hunting. I don't think it's too much. I definitely don't think it's too much. Are cell cameras making hunting too easy? Kyle and I have talked about this on previous podcasts. I would say yes, it definitely is making things easier. I mean, you're still hunting. You could have 50 cameras out there, but they're only covering a certain view, right? So that big deer could be walking behind your camera, could be walking in a different direction. The camera might not trigger. I think with cell cameras now, it's made me hunt less, because if my camera isn't going off with pictures, or if I don't have my target buck on camera, I'm probably not going to hunt that stand. And also, it was like a funny story. So last year I had a really nice buck out back. It was a 9-point. It was probably a 3-year-old. And this is where I'll get into it later on down the road, like down the questionnaire about social media and stuff. But it was just a nice buck. It was probably 100-inch, maybe 110-inch 9-point, nothing monster. But for me, it would have been probably my 3rd or 4th biggest deer I've ever killed. And in my first year ever on my property, I've owned this property for 3 years. And he was on my camera every night like clockwork. And I was like, I don't want to go out there and hunt that deer, because I don't want to go out and hunt that stand, because that deer's going to walk in front of me. And I'm going to be left with a choice. Like the choices that, a lot of us hunters are preaching is, letting these deer grow, letting them get to a different age class. And if this deer walks in front of me in bow range, I am going to shoot this deer, because this will be my first deer on my property, my first bow buck in like 7 years. Like this deer will die if he walks in front of me. So I didn't hunt it. I hunted a different stand and was able to harvest a nice buck. It was still in that smaller category, because for me, if it makes me shake and I get the buck fever, that's my standards, right? Like I am out there to shoot really big mature whitetails, but it's a step ladder, right? Like, you start out and you whack them and stack whatever deer you see. And some people don't grow out of that stage. But like for me, in the way I was raised, like, you start to pass on those younger 4-points, those spike horns, the smaller 8s, and then you work your way up, right? So I'm in that stage right now where I've shot 6 or 7 2-year-old 8-points. I've shot a handful of 3-year-old bucks. I'm in that in-between range where it's time to take that step to where it's got to be a 3, it's got to be a 4-year-old for me to shoot it, which is better said than done, because when I got an itchy trigger finger, it's hard to control. But those, I feel like Ted did it there. Like if it's brown, it's down. But yeah, it's tough. I think I digress. With cell cameras, it does make things easier. You don't have to go out, spread scent in the woods. Like you can put a camera down in the swamp and have good batteries, have a solar panel on it, and you won't need to check that all year long. Until you go out and hunt during whatever time you see fit to do it. So it definitely does make things easier. Would I give it up now? Probably not. Definitely not. Like I wouldn't give it up unless it was made illegal. I know some states have done that for certain areas, but no, I would definitely not give it up. It makes hunting certain stands and certain wind directions, it just makes it too easy. What is the most overrated piece of hunting gear? For what I do, and some people will say that's insane, but I know some people that use thermals for, walking into stands so they're not bumping deer. And for me, I think that would be the most overrated piece of gear, because they're super expensive. And if you're doing it right, even if you have a thermal, you're still gonna be bumping deer. You might not choose a certain path for it, right? But I think even if you have a thermal, you're going to be pushing deer. So I think thermals for that use is overrated, especially at the price. But if you are a predator hunter, that is the most crucial piece of gear. But on the whitetail front, I think that is a overrated piece of gear. On the waterfowl front, though, because I want to dive into that a little bit. On the waterfowl front, I think would be a motorized flapper. And some people will swear by that. And I've been on some hunts where we've used a flapper before, and it seemed like it did more harm than good. Flaring geese, flaring birds, that would be my piece, but like a standard flag from a distance, I think are big. But yeah, a flapper in the spread when geese are coming in, definitely overrated piece of gear. What's one piece of gear you wouldn't hunt without? Probably my weapon. Gear I wouldn't hunt without. for whitetail hunting, a rangefinder. Rangefinders are, especially for archery, I mean, you can be the best judge of, that tree's per se 15 yards from, like doing target shooting and stuff. But there's certain elements where your depth perception gets thrown off. I still remember my best ever day of hunting. And this was back when I was probably 13-ish, 14-ish, hunting by myself on a leased piece of property that my dad and a couple of his buddies owned, setting up on a ridge. And there was a gully and another ridge, a bunch of, it was just clear cut. So there was a bunch of just pinpole trees and open woods with a bunch of oaks behind me, prime rut, early November. And I saw, oh my God, how many deer did I see that day? How many bucks did I see? I saw 8 different bucks. And at my age there and in what I thought was a shooter buck, all 8 of them are shooter bucks. Probably now 5 of them are shooter bucks, which is still crazy to say, especially now with, trail cameras. You can, pretty much what you have on your property. And back in that time, we had show cameras. It wasn't very great. It just wasn't good access to put cameras out and get them. And it still really wasn't that prominent in a lot of cases. So a lot of it was going in blind. And so seeing 8 different deer you've never seen before, hunting a piece of property you've hunted maybe once or twice in your life, was an insane experience. And when I mean a rangefinder would have been crucial in this moment, is one of these deer, which came across at my boss. I was ready for it, because not to throw myself under the bus, but the first 2 bucks that came in that were big deer, I was not ready for it. They came out of a different direction. They winded me. They were gone. So seeing that many deer after being winded by 2 big bucks is crazy. I know, but I'm not lying to you. So this third deer comes in. I'm ready for it. It's a really nice 8-point. Comes around, doesn't come on my ridge, but goes on the next ridge next to me. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, crap. That deer is 40 yards away, and as a 13, 14-year-old, I would say my max range was 25 yards, and so I let that deer walk. And come to find out, after talking with my dad and some of the other buddies, that ridge was 20 yards away, and that's just because of the depth perception and what that gully looked like going down on the other side. I know it's crazy to think that 20 and 40 yards were the same thing, but as a 14-year-old in a tree stand overlooking a gully with another ridge on the other side, it seemed like it was a mile away. And so ever since then, I've always had a rangefinder with me, whether that be for turkey hunting, goose hunting with decoys, bow hunting especially, and gun hunting as well. I always have something I always have it in my pack no matter what I'm doing. So I have to have it. And I would love to know what you guys think is a piece of equipment that you can't live without. Does a successful hunt have to end up with killing something? No, not in the slightest. I mean, you think about us as outdoorsmen and how many times have we hunted and not harvested anything? I mean, and we still do it, right? I know there's an aspect of going out for food and, that makes it successful for some of us, but for someone who, doesn't really have an issue with going out and filling a doe later in the year and still being okay to, live off that, the hunt doesn't need to be successful with killing. It's about the memories made. I think some of my favorite hunts is where we've gone back in public for waterfowl hunting and didn't see a bird, walked 3 miles in the snow and didn't shoot anything. But it was the best time in the world because we're idiots and we're doing it because we love chasing ducks. We love chasing deer. And it makes that moment where you can be like, hey, I could tell my kid how much of an idiot I was. And when he does it, when he's my age or even younger, because hopefully he'll be doing crazier stuff than me being kind of babied on private land. Like he can do those things and be like, yeah, I've done that before, and be able to tell them some of the stories that I've done and some of the stupid things that we've done. Oh my gosh, I've done some stupid things hunting. We thought it'd be a great idea to. We walked. So there's this big public piece, and this was for the split. And we've had issues around our area finding, it's just door knocking and stuff, and finding a good piece of property late season. So we're like, oh, let's go hunt this public piece. And my buddy, he's big into public land hunting, and I'll do it every once in a while, but it's a different beast. And I have private land I can hunt, so I'll do it that way, but first hunt, I didn't have any fields lined up, so we're like, let's go do this. So, and it was snow, it was cold, and we walked the river. It was 2.5, almost 3 miles back, kicking every bird in the area up. Thinking back on it, I know, stupid idiots. But, that's what we were doing. There was a bit easier access we found out later on down the road that we use now, but walked all the way back there, sat there for 5 hours, didn't see a single, we saw birds off in the distance, missed a bird, and then, walked out. And that is probably one of my favorite hunts because it's something I probably will never do again, and you think you waste all that time doing that and didn't shoot a single thing, probably froze your ass off. It's like, yeah, I did. But it's a story I can tell and joke about now because we're idiots. And I was out of shape and I was dying. And yeah, it was no fun in the moment, but now it's funny. It's hilarious to think about. But harvesting a big buck or shooting a pile of birds or catching a big fish definitely is also a great experience as well. But it doesn't need to happen to make it fun.
Let's take a quick breather from the action. Let's talk promos. Grab 25% off Hunt Proof with code GREATHP25. Save 20% off Cooler Guard using code GLO. You can take 15% off your order from Hodag using code Great Lakes. And take 10% off Pattern Pros using code Great Lakes 10. Now back to the show.
Are hunters too obsessed with antler size? I would say in today's times, yeah, I think so. I think you're blasted online. I think social media has a huge element to it. You know, someone posted on some of those forums on Facebook, you know, look at this big deer, you know, and big deer to them is 110-inch, 180-inch whitetail, you know, and they're like, that's not a big deer. Why are you in this page? Get out of this page. Like, pass that deer and he's 2 more years. It's like, but that makes this person happy. You know, why are we bashing someone for this deer that is is an awesome whitetail for this person who maybe hasn't been hunting that long or hasn't shot very many bucks to then bash him and then get them out of hunting or not even want to post it at all. You know, and that's social media in itself. Like, and I had an early taste of this early on of antler size, if it matters or not. And my first deer I shot, you know, I busted my ass. I'd practice. I'd help my dad with food plots and tree stands, you know, at 10 years old. And I got ready enough to where, you know, I could go out and hunt during the youth hunt. And it, you know, I was fortunate enough on my second shot attempt on a 4-point was able to, you know, double on a 4-point. Still the most amazing moment in my hunting profession by far, being able to share that moment with my dad and, you know, crying, you know, because, you know, for him, it's like his kid is now getting into the sport that he's dedicated a lot of his time to. And, you know, I'm now realizing this passion, sharing that moment with my father, you know, in this awesome moment. You know, we're all hanging out, we're all having a good time, you know, and my cousin, no knock on her, love my cousin to death. She goes out and she shoots up, I'm so bad at judging deer, but I would say it's a 115, 120-inch, I think it was an 8-point, you know, and me seeing that deer versus my deer, body size, antler size, you know, it drained me. Like, I was upset. I was like, I wasn't happy. Like, I wasn't happy at all. I was like, all those emotions that I felt earlier in the hunt. And when I got up to that deer, I was holding, I had the biggest smile. I was so excited. And then I saw her deer and I'm like, this sucks. It's not the antler size. You know, it's not someone else's deer that makes your deer less important. And I think that's what we've gotten into in today's times with social media, is seeing all these influencers, seeing people, say like myself, like other people shooting these bigger deer, and you shoot your deer that you're super excited about and you post about it, and not saying I'm not bashing it because I'm super jacked for you, but other people out there that are bashing these people for shooting this deer and they're super excited about, and now we're bashing them. I think it's insane. I think that's what drives people out of the sport of hunting. That's why people don't post anymore. It should be something that should be celebrated. They're getting food for themselves. They're happy about it, you know, and it sucks. It sucks to see what social media has done to the hunting to make antler size the mentality. Not to say that's not what we're shooting for, right? That's what some of these rules are in place for, to help get deer to mature size. And that's a totally different topic, right? Getting deer to maturity, whether it be a doe or a buck, is different than someone being happy about shooting a smaller buck. You know, there's a time and a place for it, but after someone harvests something or someone that's excited about a deer they have on camera, definitely not the time and place, especially in an argumentative and bashing manner, for sure. Would you rather shoot a 130-inch buck on private land or a 100-inch buck on public land? For me, who has never been a public land hunter, and I know what it takes and what it goes into harvesting a public land buck and all the hours it takes on the ground to actually make it a successful hunt, I would say the 100-inch whitetail, hands down. I put a lot of time and a lot of work in out back and on my parents' property to be able to harvest big deer, but there's other elements in public land that you don't see on private land that makes it difficult. So 100% 100-inch buck on public land would be the way to go. But for my second deer, if I already shot one, it'd definitely be the 130 for sure, hands down. What's harder, killing your first deer or your first mature buck? I missed a lot of bucks in my lifetime, and I'm only 29 years old. I've been hunting for 19 years, and, I miss a ton of deer that haunt me. I would say, it goes both ways. I would say killing my first big deer as a young adult was my hardest. I told a story on another podcast, but I shot my 4-point, super excited I'd missed it, came back and shot it again, was able to get it. Later that year, was hunting over a big field and had this doe come out during the rut, had a doe come out, a nice 2-year-old 8-point, nothing monster came out, but for me, it was huge at that time. Came out, and being able to watch that deer walk 400 yards across the field coming at me, it gets the blood pumping. And if the blood doesn't get pumping with the deer, I don't know what you're doing in this sport. But it came across the field, and as a 10-year-old, seeing that deer coming across and, having to be quiet, having to be still, and stands back in that day weren't super quiet, and hunting in a ladder stand that'd probably been sitting there and just the straps reset on, every year. It was pretty creaky. So that deer was coming across the field, and, the adrenaline started going, arms shaking, legs shaking, which in return, the tree was shaking, the stand was shaking. And let's just say that I did not harvest that deer because the doe got close enough, and the doe goes, yeah, there's people in that stand, so we're out of here. It took me up until I was 19 when I shot, I would say, my first mature deer. And in that time frame, I had missed four deer, I think, in that time frame. So from when I had first started to when I shot my first, I would say mature was a 3-year-old. So in some people's eyes, that's not a mature deer, but in my eyes, I think that for Michigan, that's a mature deer in this moment in time right now. Shot my first mature deer, which scored at 120 with a bow. I think what helped me out a lot was that it came out of nowhere. And I've noticed that even now today, where if I have a deer coming across the field and I have time to think about it and get my head going, I can't control anything. Like the nerves, even if it's a doe, my nerves are going crazy. But when it's happens quickly and I don't have time to think, and it's a split second decision, which kind of happened this year with my buck that I shot, the nerves don't really get there until after the fact. And then it's just a full meltdown in the body, which if you know, the buck fever is something you don't want to mess with. And if you haven't experienced it, you need to. All right. Should kids start hunting as young as possible? I don't think so. I think there's a time and a place. I know in today's time, you can, with a mentor tag, and you can start hunting as early as possible. For me, I thought the sweet spot was that 10 to 12 range, where you can actually understand and have the memories of being able to be out in the woods and stuff. Growing up, you have that urge to want to, do the things that your dad does. My dad was a big hunter, right? So as a kid, I always wanted to deer hunt. So as soon as I was able to be quiet enough for a certain amount of time, he would take me with you, which then in return, I got to watch him shoot some really nice bucks or does or turkeys. And so that builds that inner, hey, I want to do this. What's this all about? Learn more, ask questions. And I think doing that at too young of an age, where they get put in front of the weapon, whether that be a turkey, bear, deer, elk, whatever that may be, they don't realize they don't realize it. And some of these kids out there shooting 140-inch deer during youth season, which is a totally different topic. And I would say me saying that is a little bit of jealousy, because I've never shot a deer like that, right? And a lot of people are like, they don't, they shouldn't be shooting that deer. People are saying that they're just jealous. And that's, if they don't own up to that, that's their own problem, right? But there's a little bit of a jealousy. But I think going back on just even them hunting and killing an animal, whether that be a spike horn or a doe, wherever it may be, I think there needs to be a certain age. And I'm not saying 10 to 12 is the right age, but I do think being 5 years old and shooting a deer, even if you're cognitively ready and can do it, I think is still way too young. And I'm not saying that age is the right age to do it, but having them being able to shoot a weapon as soon as they can, I think there's steps to it, right? Teaching them the ways, being able to do certain things. Is hunting becoming too expensive for the average person? No, because I think you can still shoot a deer, whether that be a buck or a doe, and not break the bank. I think people today are getting too caught up in having to have the best and the greatest thing, when you can go out and shoot a deer with a pre-owned bow, go buy a used gun at a gun shop. You can do it and not break the bank and still be successful. It's if you think of yourself, you think if you need to be successful with having the fancy clothing, the fancy gun, the fancy bow, the fancy equipment to get out there, if you think you need that, then that's the issue, right? Like, I guess per se, like, with some certain other things, maybe not having a place to go and hunt, but if you're dedicated to the sport and you want to get into it, public land's out there and it's free of charge, to do in some cases. So I think if you really want to do it and you don't need the fancy stuff to do it. So I definitely don't think it's getting too expensive. Has social media helped or hurt hunting? I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier with the bashing of people that are, posting pictures and stuff like that. I think it has its bright spots. I really do. I think it does. Like, I've learned a lot through social media with, the content creators out there about habitat management, tree stand setup, especially when I listened to a ton of podcasts on smaller properties and ways to be able to grow mature whitetails in those smaller properties. So I definitely think there are some bright spots and there are some great pages out there where the people are very welcoming and super excited for you. But there also is that negative element to it where people are out there chasing big deer and only big deer. That's all they care about, which is okay. But it's also the respect of the animal as well, where you see people out there posting pictures. They're looking for the clicks, right? They're looking for the sponsorships. They're looking for the views, looking for the money. And that's not why we hunted. That's not why our forefathers, I think that's what you say, forefathers did it before us, right? Like, that's not why we did it. Did it for food, did it to survive. And still needing that some source of that today is kind of why I do it, right? Like, I do it because it feeds my family, but also because I care about the animal. And I've seen some things out there which disgust me for views. Like the guys driving a truck through a field of geese shooting at them. Like, that's terrible. I saw some video on there where there was a crippled goose and they walked up with the butt of the gun, they smacked it they took the butt of the gun and they smacked the goose in the head, and like, got millions of views. But it's like, that's why people hate hunting right there, is because of the disrespect towards the animal. And that's the biggest knock on social media, is because people will do stupid shit and get views on it. So, and the people that are doing it the right way and doing it humanely and, treating the animal like it's I wouldn't say human being because that's fucking weird, like an animal that you respect and you cherish that animal. Like, that's the good things on social media, like those people out there that are doing it the right way. So I think there is a semblance of both, but I think it does lean towards the negative on it. And that's kind of why, we started this page, so many years ago, is because there was a lot of negative stuff out there, a lot of bashing, and we wanted to be that place where people could come to us and ask us questions. And it could be the stupidest question in the world, but like, we've all been there. We've all had those questions where it's like, how do I do this? How do I do a food plot? How do I set up a tree stand? How do I put up a pop-up tent? Like, there's those things out there where if you go to someone else, they might knock you. You might post that in a forum. I think the biggest thing I've seen online is like what is it? It's like, when is shooting light? What bird is this? Type of thing, which, yes, if you're hunting and you're out hunting, you need to know when shooting light is, what kind of species of bird you're shooting at before you shoot it, of course. And if you're allowed to shoot a certain size deer. Like, those are things like you need to know the ground rules. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts on it. But people posting it maybe before they go hunting, like, hey, I seen this bird. What kind of bird is this? Or, hey, what time's shooting light tomorrow? Which in reality, we all have phones, we all have laptops, we all can get a digest, we all can tell, go in there and look at it. But some people, they use Facebook as their source, right? And so they post it in there and they just get bashed. And so that's the negative aspect of it. And we hope to be that page where people can come to us, ask us those stupid questions and get a real response, because in some way we've been there or we can relate to it. So I would like to say social media is helping, but I do think there is a negative connotation with it. What's the biggest misconception non-hunters have about hunting? I think the biggest misconception is that we truly care about the animal. At least for me, per se, like, I truly have a passion and love for whitetails, for turkeys, for geese, for ducks. Like, I have a true passion. I have a true love for those animals. Yes, I do hunt them. I do harvest them. They taste amazing. But I do everything in my body to make sure to keep those animals safe outside of me being able to hunt them, right? Like, I spend thousands of dollars a year making my property. My dad spends thousands of dollars, on his property making deer habitat and making them so they can thrive. I think that's the biggest misconception, that we truly care about the animal. And I think a lot of people out there that aren't hunters may see a clip like the one I said about some guy bashing a goose across the head with the butt of his gun to to dispatch it. Like people see that and they go like, they have no respect towards those animals. Like posting a weird selfie with a deer, like stuff like that, where it's like, what are you doing? You know, like that's what people think. That's what the people think of when they think of hunters. And that's not truly what I would say 90% of hunters are. Like they truly have a passion. They truly have a love for the animal that they're hunting. And that's why they do it. And the meat and what it does is a byproduct. Like we'd be totally happy with creating this habitat for these animals and them being successful with not harvesting anything at all. You know, so I think that's the biggest misconception people have that aren't in the realm, is they don't really know what we're thinking and why we do it. If I could hunt one Michigan species for the rest of my life, what would it be? Man. So in my lifetime, I've hunted whitetails, turkeys, all in Michigan, bear, geese, and ducks. And out of those, I think with how many memories I had with it and spending time with my grandfather and my dad and, you know, with my wife and hopefully my son here this year, like I think whitetails is the animal I'd hunt the most. I think there's something about it, some type of itch that I get that isn't scratched in waterfowl hunting. Bear hunting, I loved. It was a great experience, but like I could probably live without doing it again, to be honest with you, just because there were some things that happened that I didn't know about going into it that happened that per se that kind of turned me off. And because I would say whitetails for sure, just with the memories and my knowledge of it. Like that's what I have the most knowledge in. And so I think that's what I would do if I could only hunt. If I could change one Michigan hunting regulation tomorrow, what would it be? I think the easy one is baiting. I think baiting is, as you can see by the 300-foot rule they just passed, I think there's something with it that they must not really care about CWD because they're doing it. And that's why we outlawed it in the first place. So I'd say baiting would be the easy one. A more controversial one, per se. Probably need a lot of flack for this, especially for my dad. But I would say crossbow hunting. Crossbow hunting for people that are able to use a compound bow. I think if you are able to use a compound bow, you should be able to use a compound bow. But if you have some type of injury, age, stuff like that, I think 100% you should be able to use a crossbow. But if you are able to pull back a bow and do it safely and at the right poundage, you should use a bow, and you shouldn't be able to use a crossbow. But if you can't, crossbow, I mean, 100%, because we want you out there hunting, want you out there enjoying things that you can do. But if you can, bow for sure. So a couple rundowns, a couple quick questions here, but I'll run through them here. Why not? I'm only at 46 minutes. What else you got to do? I've been kind of cool, right? Like, you enjoy listening to me a little bit at least? If you don't, I'm sorry. Kyle will be back next week, I promise. Bow or gun? Bow, 100%. Public or private? Like I said, public's a different beast, but private and being able to manicure my property to the way I want it to be. So private for sure. Morning or evening, as much as I hate getting up in the mornings, I think a morning in a duck blind or a morning in the deer woods, there's a magical experience about it. And if you haven't experienced it, for the non-hunters, like watching the woods come alive or watching just the world itself come alive over a lake and seeing all the birds and just hearing them come awake, like it's an awesome experience that you don't get in the evenings, which I've shot a lot more deer in the evenings, but that morning experience, I might have to lean more towards the morning. Early season or rut, like that's a dumb question. Rut for sure. Tree stand or ground blind. Never had a ton of luck with the ground blind, so I have to go tree stand with that one. Cell camera or traditional camera? Cell camera 100% all day. Like not having to track, go back, check my cameras once a week or how much time you go in between. I'm a very impatient person when it comes to my trail cameras, so I was like going back there like every 2 days, which is insane, but I just love seeing deer. I love deer. So I love seeing them. And so having it being on my phone and getting a picture, just right sent to my phone is huge. So cell camera all the way. Food plot or natural browse. I love the food plot element to it. I love being able to go out and work the soil and plant something that I potentially could harvest. To just adds more equity into it. Not saying like going out and planting trees or shrubs or whatever is a big thing, but I've never gotten much into that yet. That could change in a couple years once I do that, but food plots per se right now. A big buck story or just a great story, just a great hunting story? I would have to say a great story, because some of the greatest stories happen when something isn't harvested, like I said earlier. Like it's doing stupid shit. Like that makes a great story. A solo hunt or a deer camp? Deer camp for sure. That's one of the things that's drawn me towards waterfowl hunting, is because it has that element of being able to hunt with people and being able to enjoy and the camaraderie and stuff. And that's what, like with the deer camp, like that's what you get. So I enjoy my peace and quiet, and that's what my deer hunting is my peace and quiet time of things. But deer camp and being around people that are like-minded individuals and being able to talk deer stories and just shoot the shit, like, that's a great experience. Michigan or out-of-state hunting? I mean, it's hard to say because I've only been out of state one time, and that was back when I was 18 years old in late December in Indiana in the freezing cold temperatures. So right now I would say Michigan because I love Michigan. I love hunting in Michigan. I've never hunted anywhere else, so maybe that leads me toward more of an out-of-state hunt because I've never done it before. But for right now, I would have to say Michigan. That was all the questions I had, and I don't know. It was interesting, right? Like learning some different opinions. It was pretty different from things that we've done in the past of being kind of just. It wasn't as natural flowing, and I'm sorry. That's on me for that because I'm not the greatest podcaster in the world. That's why Kyle is the man in that. I'm in the face of the podcast. But, I think I did pretty good in it. But some of the strongest opinions I have on in this is the social media aspect of it, right? Like social media is meant to be really good. And in the hunting world, it can be really bad because it can lead to things where it can push people out. And social media can be really good, and we've made so many friends and like partnerships through social media. So we're so grateful for social media, but there is a dark side to social media that a lot of people see, and which I hope will change. But it's social media, and we can say whatever we want on it with really no repercussion per se. So unfortunately, it's gonna be something we have to live with, and hopefully we can do our part as hunters to be more loving and more getting people into the sport versus pushing them out by negative criticism in it. But, I went through a lot of topics. I kind of rambled through a lot of them, and I hope you found one in there that you're like, yeah, I didn't agree with that, because that's what makes this podcast great, because we can disagree on it. You can let me know. We can chat about it. I'll give you my cell. We can talk about it on the phone. I don't care. We can talk in the DMs. Do whatever. And we can talk about it and maybe come to some type of mutual decision. But, if we don't, we don't, and that's fine. But if you have any questions, if you have disagreements, don't be too negative, right? Because, like I said, we're trying to make social media a better place for us hunters out there. So if you have a disagreement, let's be cordial about it, and we can chat. But if you have any questions, have any just comments on things that I've said in this podcast of why I said things that I said, put it in the comments. I'd love to chat with you about it. And then something that I would love to do, and since Kyle's not here, I can say it, and he can't stop me from saying it. So sorry, Kyle, I'm going to say it, is if you have any questions or if you have any topics that you want us to talk about, please send it to us. We'd love to chat about it. We love to get other people's inputs from out there, and we'd love to talk about it on the podcast, because that's what it's for, is to bring people together, chat about it, have discussions, have questions, find some type of answer, some type of common ground. That's why we're doing this. So, yeah. So if you have anything, please send it to us. We'd love to chat about it, and like I said, I appreciate you guys tuning in this podcast. It's been a fun one, very nerve-wracking. And I'll say I did this in one take, but in reality, it took me about 2 or 3 takes to do this because I kept stuttering over my words, and I still did in this podcast. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. And next week, Kyle will be back and under control. So thank you guys for hanging on with me. Hope you found a little bit of something to talk about. Bring it to us. We'd love to chat with you about it. So, but other than that, stay tuned to next week. Keep listening in. We appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you next week.